Imagine a Kumbh Mela with 27 million people coming into a small town, and over 3 weeks it becomes a pop-up city.
We would call this exercise the spot and the
spot.
probe phase, where in the spot phase, we're actually spotting what kind of challenges are worth solving and what kind of talent may help in solving that challenge.
Yeah.
And in the probe phase, we're actually going on the field and doing all of this immersion, what we call. In the field of agriculture, what are the problems, the challenges that are there that are worth solving right now?
Right.
At that time, we're also identifying who these stakeholders are, who are the experts who are giving us these inputs.
Right.
We may conduct something like an unconference, an unconference where everybody gives input, not a conference where only one person is speaking or something
Right.
like that. So all these experts come together and actually tell us what the problems are worth solving. Many times we realize that it is not very easy to achieve this, especially for a social enterprise.
Yeah.
It's important for the teams to get some kind of a funding or a grant or some mechanism so that they can sustain themselves beyond the grow phase. In many of these challenges, we have no idea what the problems are. So we become the innovators ourselves in terms of being open to what possibilities come. So I think one of the most important qualities that a coach or a mentor needs to have is this openness to whatever happens, whatever emerges. We are actually shunning our bias aside, and then we are open to actually considering that possibility.
Hello and welcome to a super fantastic episode of Pitch Cafe podcast. Today I'm in this amazing studio with an amazing person and I can't hold my excitement. Today we have with us a game changing startup incubator ecosystem in India that is making waves all over the world. Think about an organization that is enabling youth who want to change India, who want to get into the grassroots level problems and they want to make an impact. And this is not about making money. This incubator system is all about social impact. I did not believe this until I saw the kind of work they have done. Their launch happened with Kumbhathon. Imagine a Kumbh Mela with 27 million people coming into a small town, and over 3 weeks it becomes a pop-up city. How will you manage the operations? How are you going to do food distribution? How will you manage stampede? Every time there is an event like this, so many people die in stampedes. This incubator solved those problems, and with young students, high schoolers, local organization. This is one of its kind concept and nobody has ever seen anything like this. That is why I was super excited and I said I'm going to invite the people from this organization which is called DISQ, Digital Impact Square. They are a social impact wing, the CSR wing of TCS, and they're based out of Nashik. Why Nashik? Because Kumbh Mela happened in Nashik, and as a very sacred initiative, they launched this incubator as part of the whole effort. The effort went on for several years, but Kumbhathon happened in 2015. Now, I have told you so many different things about this organization. Let's bring on somebody who is neck deep in running the operations in this incubator. Without further ado, let's bring on Bhanu Prasad, who is one of the super mentors in Digital Impact Square in Nashik, and his startups are getting recognized in Silicon Valley. So, Bhanu, welcome to Pitch Cafe podcast.
Thank you, Vidya. Nice to be here.
Wonderful. Was there something you would like to add to the introduction?
No, I think this is a great beginning. Also, the kind of work that's happening at Digital Impact Square deserves a lot of attention.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you're paying attention to this and spreading the word. Thank you.
Yeah, so Banu, tell me, why are you guys so low key about the amazing work you're doing? Every time I ask you about this amazing technology you're building for the blind people or people who cannot move their hands, or this is incredible technology. You're building like a sixth sense for people who have lost a sense. Now, how are you so low key? Why are you not commercializing this? What is Digital Impact Square? Tell us all about this.
Great. I think this question probably needs us to take a step back, a few steps back maybe, understand the origins of Digital Impact Square, and then probably think about why we do this the way we do it. As you mentioned rightly in your introduction, Digital Impact Square started off as a result of the Kumbh Mela, right, that happens in Nashik. Just for perspective, Nashik is a small city, right? So it's right in between, say, something like Mumbai and Pune, large cities.
Yeah.
Nashik just has like 1.5, 2 million, less than 2 million population, and 10 times that number, or
Yeah.
20 times that number
Correct.
of visitors come in for this short duration.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the city is overwhelmed. All its resources are stretched to the maximum. So usually when the Kumbh Mela happens, as you said, there would be stampedes, there would be children lost, there would be some kind of a hygiene issue, maybe an epidemic of sorts. And so obviously the goal of the district administration and everybody involved is to ensure that the conduct of this entire initiative happens as smoothly as possible. Now, it so happens that a few really brilliant scientists, researchers, and academicians, everybody got together and said, how do we make what happens in Nasik's Kumbh Mela in 2015 the best ever Kumbh Mela?
Yeah.
So if that were the case, right, just think about it. So we had to get everybody on board.
Yeah.
So this started off, of course, with Professor Ramesh Raskar, who is from MIT Media Labs, and a few others, key individuals from Nasik, who were also invested in this mission. And when we did this initiation, at that time, there was this very clear alignment that this has to be a grassroots initiative.
Yeah.
And
tell us, what is grassroots for people who don't understand the term?
Yeah, so grassroots is basically right at the last beneficiary in the country. For example, now if it is in education, the beneficiary, the last mile would be a school, and especially a school in the district or in the municipal corporation. It will be a Zilla Parishad. So these are the last mile beneficiaries of an initiative that we do. This is what we would call grassroots. If it is a grassroots in agriculture, it would be the farmer or a farmer producer organization.
Yeah. Wonderful. So you mentioned that you brought all these organizations together, but that was a 2-year planning which went into this high-tech Kumbh Mela. And India is a country of such melas. In Kashi, they have Varanasi, they have stampedes like this. Even in Tirupati, they have stampedes like this. And I'm from Karnataka. In Karnataka, I've gone to so many such events. I get pushed. Sometimes I fall down. It's humongous.
Yeah.
So what happened between the Hightech Kumbhathon and the Digital Impact Square? What happened in that? How did all the solutions you built, how did it inspire this incubator?
Yeah, so as we were trying to understand what problems are worth solving, it is very important for us to go back. So the philosophy that we follow at Digital Impact Square is that the problems need to be discovered first.
Right.
And hence we got in touch with all the district administration, the local experts, and the people who actually understand the city and the Kumbh Mela well.
Yeah.
And these are the ones who actually told us what these challenges are. And then it was a series of innovation cycles, as you say, where young people, guided by mentors, actually went on the field and discovered what these problems are.
Yeah.
And then developed solutions for it. So even to this day at Digital Impact Square, we sort of follow the same ethos, same design principle, that we take young individuals, give them excellent mentorship, give them an opportunity to experience these problems firsthand, and then come up with solutions. And hence you see the quality of solutions that our teams come up with, the kind of insights that our teams come up with is definitely different compared to other places where they would get incubated.
So, on that note, I want to ask you, look, I've been in the startup ecosystem for 5+ years now, and 9 out of 10 startups are failing. And Bangalore has become a startup city.
Right.
India is turning into a startup nation. All the youngsters, 50% of them, at least once before they graduate, they think of doing startup. So why are the startups failing like that? And how do you use this philosophy of taking more time to discover the problem? Can you give like a systematic approach? Like, how do you do that?
Right. So, first of all, the 1 out of 10 startups succeeding is sort of in the commercial startups. In social enterprises, it's even more challenging.
Wow.
Because the kind of problems that we are solving is very, very different. The kind of ecosystem in which these problems are getting solved is also different. The society in which we are operating, and also the number of resources that are available for them is also little limited. And so the intervention that we created through Digital Impact Square addresses that particular gap of the first 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
The idea at this first 18 months is, if we spend the really good quality time in understanding what the problem is first, discovering that problem, and then co-creation. It's not that you go back and sit in a lab or in an office and build a solution, but you co-create the solution with the same people who are experiencing the problem, and then go on to test, iterate with them, and then build the solution in such a way that the pilots and the scale happens along with the same users.
Right.
So this is very important, and a very word that you'll probably hear a lot of Digital Impact Square coaches and the team use is ecosystem. So for us, right from the Kumbhathon days, it was very important for us to create this kind of an ecosystem. When I say an ecosystem, it's a mix of stakeholders coming from the government, the local NGOs that are there, academic institutions, researchers, innovators, corporates, industry, all of them coming together to address challenges, and also who have the best understanding of what the problem is.
Yeah. You know what happens when you bring people from different fields together and work on one problem? It sounds very magical, but really, what happens? Like, what is happening? What is not happening in a regular startup ecosystem? You see it happening in such a mix.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think an ecosystem, the magical thing about an ecosystem is that you get insights rapidly, right, across different segments, right from, say, for example, something about a behavioral trait of a user, right, or to a technical aspect about a delivery of a drug, to maybe an operational aspect about how payments are made to contractors in the government setup. So all of these insights, for example, are very important for us to understand day one, because we would probably spend a year to discover this and fail later.
Right.
So right from day one at Digital Impact Square, when teams come to us, this ecosystem is introduced to them on the table right up front. When the challenge is given to them, the ecosystem is also made available to them. Yeah. And that helps us accelerate this journey of discovery faster.
Wonderful. So, I work with so many startups, and then I see many of them failing because they picked the wrong idea.
Yeah.
They picked the wrong problem to work on. Now, the most common way a startup gets into the startup world is they find a problem which they experienced and saw a few other people experience the same problem, and then they decide that, yeah, let's do a startup.
Yeah.
And then they bring resources, or they call their friend, and then they start building. This is they call their colleagues who they worked with, they are comfortable, and then that ends up becoming a team. But that recipe is failing miserably.
Yeah.
So what is a good way to ideate or to look at different ideas and pick the right idea? What are some techniques to pick the startup idea from multiple startup ideas? How do you do that?
Right. So one thing to consider, I'll give you an example of a typical startup idea that comes very often in our applications, right? So early days, at least, is mobile phone apps to detect potholes in roads.
Yeah.
Right. So or mobile phone apps to detect garbage spilling from garbage bins in the city.
Right.
And so what's the problem with an idea like that is you're looking at the symptom. You're not looking at the problem. You're not looking at what actually causes this problem. You're not looking at the system. You're looking at just one element of the system, which is just the garbage bins or the potholes on the road. So what we encourage teams to do is to go take a step back and not look at all these symptoms alone, but actually take multiple steps inside and understand what the problems are, deep-rooted problems are. So we would categorize it like this. We want to understand what are the challenges first. If you take any domain, if it is education or agriculture or healthcare, any of these domains, we would like to understand what are the challenges first. And in the process of talking to the stakeholders in this ecosystem, we uncover that not just this, in this challenge, there are several problems that are worth solving. And among those problems, we will actually rank them and say, which is it that is actually solving through technology, which has a lifespan within which we can do it in, say, 18 months, we can develop a prototype and a pilot. All of these characteristics actually help in filtering out among all the problems that are there, which of the problem that we should actually identify.
Yeah.
And then we approach that problem, making sure that there is alignment, there is validation of the problem first, and then there is validation of whatever steps we need to take later on. So it's very important to take that methodical approach. We would call this exercise the spot and the probe phase, where in the spot phase, we're actually spotting what kind of challenges are worth solving.
Yeah.
And what kind of talent may help in solving that challenge.
Yeah.
And in the probe phase, we're actually going on the field and doing all of this immersion, what we call.
Can you give us an example of immersion? What did you mean by that?
So immersion is putting ourselves right in middle of the problem, right? Say, for example, if it is an agriculture problem, right? That there is a challenge with respect to the quality of soil.
Yeah.
So we would like to go all the way on the ground and understand from the farmers on the field what is the challenges with soil quality, understand from the experts, understand from scientists, understand from all of these aspects, and then make a picture for ourselves of what this problem means.
Yeah, but if you're doing a startup, that problem has to have scale.
Yeah.
You can't pick a burning problem that only 4 people use or 5 people use.
Right.
You can't solve that. So, how do you understand how scalable the problem is? What is the formula, or what is your approach?
Right. I hope there was a formula. So one of the things that we do along with this validation of the problem is also understand, is this a problem that is for an enterprise to solve, a social enterprise to solve? We see that maybe of all the problems that exist, maybe 15 to 20% of problems are being solved by a social enterprise. Many of them require an NGO to solve it. Many of them may also require a government actually to create a policy for it. So how we would understand that is through understanding the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And through the stakeholders. When we talk to these experts, we understand, is this a problem that's just experienced, say, for example, in Nashik?
Yeah.
Is this also in the neighboring district? And if it occurs in a neighboring district, what form does it occur in? Is it in the same form? Will the startup have to make too many changes?
Correct.
Right? So all of these are very important parts of the validation itself.
Wonderful.
In the probe phase, it's a very important understanding before we develop any pilot and MVP and so on, that we understand that this is a problem that's worth solving. When I say worth solving through an enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Albert Einstein said, if you had 100 minutes to solve a problem, spend 90 to 95% of the time framing the question.
Right.
What is a problem? Frame your question, and then in 5 minutes you'll come up with the answer.
Correct.
So that's exactly what your philosophy is. Now, looks like Spot is finding the problem.
Yeah.
And Probe is going and talking to people and verifying if that is really the problem, or what else is there around the problem which you can enhance your insights with. Now, what happens in the next phase? What is the next phase? And what happens in the next phase?
Right. So what happens in the spot phase? Let me just add some more details to it if it's okay. So spot phase is when we are trying to find challenges that are worth solving, we are going to the stakeholders again, to the experts, to the government, for example, and understanding in the field of agriculture, what are the problems, the challenges that are there that are worth solving right now.
Right.
At that time, we are also identifying who these stakeholders are, who are the experts who are giving us these inputs.
Right.
We may conduct something like an unconference, an unconference where everybody gives input, not a conference where only one person is speaking or something like that. So all these experts come together and actually tell us what the problems are worth solving. And then we take notes of all of these things when we document challenges worth solving in each domain. And then in the probe phase, with the same stakeholders are actually given to these startups. And then they go on the field and do this research. At the end of the probe phase, our expectation is that the startups come up with a minimum viable prototype. A minimum viable prototype is a self-contained application or a platform or a system which can deliver some value to the end beneficiary.
Yeah.
And that value that is being delivered will, in the next phase, as we go on to the next phase, the grow phase, we are trying to see if just that limited number of users who are using it as part of our pilot or a prototype, can it be scaled up?
Yeah.
Can it go to, say, from 5 users to 50 users?
Yeah.
And what does it mean for us to leave that prototype in the wild and collect data from it? How well is it going? What happens when it scales? All of those aspects are studied in the grow phase. At that time, we also add members to the team, right? Because new skills are required.
Yeah.
Team members need to also think of scale, think of operations, think of maybe marketing, think of positioning their product better. So all of those things also happen. And then, then there's the scale phase that comes after that.
Yeah.
At the scale phase is where we are thinking of taking it and getting a first paid customer, maybe. Right. So this is our aspiration in 12 to 18 months. And many times we realize that it is not very easy to achieve this, especially for a social enterprise.
Yeah.
It's important for the teams to get some kind of a funding or a grant or some mechanism so that they can sustain themselves beyond the grow phase.
Yeah.
And then they can aspire to scale beyond that.
Wonderful. So your immersion program, you have a boot camp, right? Like 100 days. So what is this 100 days boot camp, and when do startups move on from that and stay with you for 18 months?
Yeah, so the story for the boot camp is very interesting. So when we started off initially in 2016-17, we did not have this 100-day boot camp. Our direct focus was getting on the field and immersing ourselves in the challenge in the probe, right? But when the pandemic hit, we did not have this option of going on the field and actually conducting our research.
Yeah.
So it was important for us to actually substitute that with a boot camp phase where whoever applies to us and gets selected to come to the program, we tell them, be open to going back to the drawing board. and we challenge them and say, even if you have a registered startup, if you have a product, you still, if you apply to us, we'll take you back to the drawing board and ask you fundamental questions about who your user is, what problems are you solving. And in that 100-day boot camp, we take them through the journey, right from understanding what problem, what domain you're working on, all the way to presentation skills and soft skills, how to build teams, what is leadership. So all of these content is delivered in a 100-day boot camp, and it is delivered in a hybrid mode. So those who need an ecosystem in Nashik can come to Nashik, and those who can stay virtual and continue to operate in their existing ecosystem, the stakeholders that they're engaging with, they can continue to operate remotely.
Wonderful. And this started, the hybrid model, it started in which year?
We did it in 2021.
2021. So it's been like 3 years. What has it been like 3 years? And what kind of startups have come out? And
So if you look at our application process, the spot phase, when we actually reach out for applications, so typically we get about 500 applications or so.
Wow.
Right. And we take about 10 to 12 challenges each year. And those 10 to 12 challenges get about 500 applications, people who want to apply, right? So these is young individuals. They could be college students who apply as a team, or who could be early stage entrepreneurs who are registered as a startup and coming. Now, when they come in the spot phase, we are expecting them to go through this boot camp next. So of these 500 applications, we are selecting about 25 to 30 teams, and we make offers to them. About 18 to 20 teams typically join this boot camp. And in the boot camp, because we challenge them, some of these teams recognize that they have to actually go back to the drawing board. And about 50% of the teams, 50 to 60% of the teams that are in the boot camp, then make it to our 18-month program. So during this time, there is some amount of filtering or selection that's happening, but it happens very organically. The teams recognize why they're actually going to the next phase or not going to the next phase.
Yeah, wonderful. I know that your mentorship program is very much talked about, and that's like the essence of Digital Impact Square, your mentors. So tell us a little bit about what are the sectors in which startups are coming, and what do the mentors do, and where do you get the mentors from?
Right. So I'll start with the mentors first, because it's probably our USP. We have three innovation coaches, so to say, and one innovation coach who also doubles up as a design coach. And then we have design mentors, and then we have a set of interns who help us doing very critical work in running the program itself. So in the entire innovation coach role, it's very important for the coach to sort of take away their own perspective. Most of these coaches, right, me, Samir, Sandeep, or Sanjay, they come with decades of experience building technology applications. So we have to first of all take that out, and then be open to discovering along with the teams. In many of these challenges, we have no idea what the problems are. So we become the innovators ourselves in terms of being open to what possibilities come. So I think one of the most important qualities that a coach or a mentor needs to have is this openness to whatever happens, whatever emerges. We are actually shunning our bias aside, and then we are open to actually considering that possibility. I think that's a very important attribute that I see in all of our coaches. That coach mentor role is a very important on the field role. Just like a coach is there on the field along with the players, the coach actually goes on the field along with the innovators and tries to discover these problems along with them. And then there's a lot of brainstorming, there's a lot of questioning. The primary role of the coach is to challenge the thought process, is to shape that thought process by asking questions, right? So none of them is taken for granted. So nothing that the innovator can come and say, by the way, I have an idea, I think we are going to build this. The coach will say, hold on. I'm actually going to challenge you on this thought process, right? So challenging the thought process and critical reviews, I think, are the essence of what makes Digital Impact Square really very powerful. And then we also maintain a relationship with the stakeholders. So each of these organizations that is an expert, the coach is the primary ownership of the relationship. So we understand the nuances of what's happening in the domain, what's happening in the ecosystem, and then we pass on those insights as and when needed to the startups as well. I think that's one critical role that the DISQ coaches and the mentors actually play. Why the teams are successful is a result of this combination, and also the team's willingness to actually let go of their own views and be open to all of these possibilities. It's very rare for a startup who is so possessive about their own idea, who have registered their startup already, to come to us and says, yeah, we are actually open to going back to the drawing board. And those teams actually that are open are the ones that most likely succeed and then completely evolve themselves. And we have seen startups pivot completely in a nice direction, right?
Yeah.
Going from a direction which they thought was right versus which is actually more beneficial.
Yeah, I want to do a very detailed uh, segment on all your startups, but I'll hold on there.
Yeah.
I just want to say that many of your startups are winning awards at
Right.
national and international events, and they're getting so many grants and so much recognition. So does it distract them, or how do you manage these? um, because one of the founders I spoke to, she was traveling in 3 different continents within a span of 1 month.
Yeah.
And these are all because it's a very in demand startup, and she's in 3 different places in 30 days. And how do you manage founders like this who are dynamic and who have to cater to so much media attention, and still they have to come and deliver? They have to go to the drawing board and say, I'll go back to the drawing board, I'll see what needs to be done.
Right. So I think there is a journey here. For example, startups that start with us in the first few months, we ask them to actually stay grounded to the problem and the stakeholders. Maybe after about 7, 8 months, once they understand the problem, they understand the dynamic of the landscape, they understand what other competitors and startups are doing, then we tell them to start applying for grants and competitions. The reason why we ask them to do that then is not because they have to win these competitions, is because then they get a taste of what's actually happening in this domain.
Yeah.
What kind of questions are they being asked?
Yeah.
And how is this, what are the right other kind of startups that come to these competitions?
Yeah.
And I would say in the first 12 to 24 months, most of these teams don't travel like this.
Yeah.
So the teams that you're speaking to are people who have spent 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
Right now, they have reached a stage where they have a solid engineering team that's actually working on the product and building this parallelly.
Yeah.
Whereas the founders are going out there and making sure that they become the face of the organization.
Yeah.
And present themselves. And many of these people, because they've gone through so much and they've sacrificed so much, they're recognized for their individual abilities as well.
Yeah.
For example, our founder, one of the founder, Akshita, she's recognized for an women entrepreneurship.
Correct.
She is recognized as an entrepreneur who is actually working in assistive tech internationally.
Yeah.
Right. So these are the kind of recognitions that come as a result of their work and not in as a disturbance to their work in any way.
Yeah.
And even those visits, they approach us for everything that happens, right? So if there is a application that they're filling for a competition like this, they would approach and say, how best can we make use of this opportunity? So if they're going to China, or if they're going to Europe or wherever, we try to identify an ecosystem whom they can meet.
Yeah.
And even there is some amount of work that's happening towards their startup.
Yeah, wonderful. On that note, I do want to ask you what challenges you face before I end this segment. And I think in the next segment, we can go a little bit more detailed into what sectors you're building startups in or encouraging startups in, and what kind of startup challenges you're facing, and how your ecosystem is evolving to meet those challenges.
Right. This is a very, very important aspect. So there are a couple of challenges at two levels. One is at the entrepreneur level. I think today in India, you would see a large number of youth aspiring to become entrepreneurs.
Correct.
And this fascination for entrepreneurship is there both in the urban as well as in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. But one of the challenges is that when the students graduate from college, they are not necessarily fully oriented towards entrepreneurship.
Yeah, they have a lot of energy,
They have a lot of
excitement.
yes, they have a lot of energy and excitement. They have probably heard from their friends that entrepreneurship is cool, and they're seeing role models in front of them.
Yeah.
But the preparation is not matching that sort of aspiration.
Yeah.
And when they see entrepreneurship firsthand, when they experience it, there is a challenge that they encounter. They say that this is not as easy as we thought. This is not as glamorous as we thought. There is a lot of work in this. And some of them drop off.
Yeah.
Right. So that attrition that happens is a challenge for incubators like us, because we invest a lot, because we are a very hands-on program. We invest both in terms of money, resources, time and effort of the time and effort and expectations of the stakeholders and the ecosystem. So that's one of the challenges that needs to be addressed. That means that we need to start providing entrepreneurship training, enablement, and orientation as early as possible while students graduate. And these early entrepreneurs need to get this kind of inputs. So that's one of the primary challenges at the student and entrepreneurship level. Also, as an incubator, right, it's very important for us to keep evolving our ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. So our ecosystem today comprises of government, industry, for NGOs and all of these people. It is very important that we develop sectoral partnerships.
Right.
That means depending on the sector in which we want to operate, we want to develop partnerships there.
Yeah.
And not everybody is open and available all the time for
Yeah.
us to make these kind of partnerships.
Yeah.
Right? It's also not a sustainable venture. We are thanks because we are part of the Tata Group. We have a steady flow of support that's coming, financial support. But otherwise, because we don't take equity, because we're a purely philanthropic initiative, how do we actually sustain an initiative like this?
Yeah.
So this is where the role of the ecosystem becomes very important.
Wonderful. No. I think the secret to startups succeeding in any part of the world, especially Silicon Valley, where I come from, is an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I think right here in India, in Nashik, you're creating that kind of ecosystem for the social sector. And there's one insight which helped me write this book 10 on 10, and also I'm writing another book with a couple of other investors in Silicon Valley. It's called Startup to Win. Both the books, we openly say that startup should be for purpose and profit. It's not just profit. There is so much hype about unicorns, and the new trend is social first, then for profit.
Right.
So social impact first, then profit. So you seem to be very much in the future. They're called zebra startups. And I think in India, which is the land of spiritual thinkers, this is the right kind of startup ecosystem to guide the world. So on that note, I want to wrap up this segment, but I can't wait to discuss more about what kind of startups you're building. Let's get into it. Let's do a little bit of deep dive in the next segment. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.